Sarah Chen shuffled through the crowded hallway of Nova Academy, her oversized hoodie pulled up to hide the exhaustion etched across her face. Students pushed past her without a second glance, their conversations flowing around topics she couldn't relate to anymore. Weekend parties, dating drama, the upcoming spring formal dance, normal teenage concerns that felt like echoes from another lifetime. She slipped into advanced xenobiology class just as Professor Martinez began his lecture on Kralith physiology. The alien species had been humanity's greatest threat for the past 3 years, though most civilians didn't know the full extent of the war raging across 12 star systems. Sarah found a seat in the back corner, the same spot she'd claimed since returning to school 6 months ago. Miss Chen, perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts on Kralith neural adaptation? Professor Martinez's voice cut through her wandering mind. Sarah looked up to find 30 pairs of eyes staring at her. She could feel the familiar weight of their judgment. The weird girl who'd disappeared for 2 years. The one who never talked about where she'd been. The one who sometimes flinched when doors slammed too loudly. They adapt their neural pathways based on combat experience, she said quietly. Each encounter makes them harder to predict. More dangerous. Professor Martinez raised an eyebrow. That's surprisingly detailed. Where did you learn that? Sarah's fingers unconsciously traced the thin scar along her collarbone, hidden beneath her hoodie. Just read it somewhere. The professor nodded and moved on, but Sarah caught the curious glances from her classmates. Jessica Wong, the class president, was whispering to her friends, probably wondering how the school's biggest nobody knew advanced military intelligence that wasn't in any textbook. If only they knew that Sarah had learned about Kralith neural adaptation the hard way, that she'd watched Lieutenant Commander Hayes get torn apart by a Kralith war beast that had evolved specifically to counter human plasma weapons, that she'd been the one to put 3 rounds through its skull afterward, saving what remained of Echo Squadron. The lunch bell rang, jolting Sarah from her memories. Students rushed out chattering about their plans. Sarah packed her tablet slowly, waiting for the room to empty. She preferred eating alone anyway. The cafeteria was too loud, too chaotic, too much like a battlefield. She made her way to the old maintenance shed behind the gymnasium, her secret hideout where she could eat in peace. But as she rounded the corner, she found 3 seniors already there. Marcus Webb and his crew, the kind of guys who thought intimidating younger students was entertainment. Well, if it isn't the ghost girl, Marcus sneered. What's in the bag, freak? More weird books about aliens? Sarah's muscles tensed automatically, her body shifting into a combat stance before she caught herself. These weren't enemy soldiers. They were just kids being mean, but her hand still itched for the pulse rifle that wasn't there. Just leave me alone, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Or what? Marcus stepped closer. You'll disappear for another 2 years? Maybe this time you won't come back. One of his friends laughed. Yeah, where did you go anyway? Rehab? Juvie? Mental hospital? Sarah's vision sharpened, her training kicking in despite her efforts to suppress it. She could see 17 different ways to disable all 3 of them in under 10 seconds. Marcus had a weak stance favoring his left leg. Jake was texting on his phone, completely unaware of his surroundings. Tommy was trying to look tough but kept glancing nervously at the exits. Amateurs. On Kepler 442b, their lack of situational awareness would have gotten them killed in minutes. I asked you to leave me alone, Sarah repeated, her voice carrying a new edge that made Marcus falter for just a moment. But teenage pride won out over instinct. Marcus grabbed for her lunch bag and Sarah reacted without thinking. Her hand shot out, fingers closing around his wrist with precisely calculated pressure. Marcus yelped and dropped to one knee, his face going white with pain. What the hell? Jake started forward but stopped when Sarah's cold gaze fixed on him. Walk away, she said simply. Now, something in her tone made all 3 boys step back. Marcus clutched his wrist, staring at Sarah like he was seeing her for the first time. Without another word, they hurried away, leaving Sarah alone with her racing heart and trembling hands. She slumped against the shed wall, trying to push down the memories that threatened to surface. The screaming, the blood, the sound of Kralith weapons charging up for another volley, the weight of command when she was barely 18 years old. Her tablet chimed with a message. Sarah glanced at it and her blood ran cold. The message was from an encrypted military channel that shouldn't exist on civilian networks. 3 words that changed everything. They found you. Sarah's hands moved automatically, deleting the message and scanning for traces of the sender. Her mind was already calculating exit routes, weapon caches, and extraction points. The peaceful facade of her normal life crumbled in an instant, revealing the hardened soldier underneath. She'd tried so hard to be just another student, to blend in and pretend that the nightmares were just dreams, to convince herself that Captain Sarah Reaper Chen was someone she used to be, not someone she still was. But deep down, she'd always known this day would come. The war wasn't over, no matter what the newsfeed said, and humanity's greatest weapon couldn't stay hidden forever. Sarah pulled her hoodie tighter and walked back toward the school building, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. She had maybe 6 hours before they traced the message to her location, 6 hours to decide whether to run again or stand and fight. As she passed a group of laughing students, she wondered if they'd still be alive tomorrow. If any of them would be, because if the Kralith had found her, they'd found Earth. And this time there might not be anywhere left to run. The ordinary girl was about to become extraordinary again, whether she wanted to or not. Sarah sat in her last period physics class, but her mind was light years away on the frozen battlefields of Kepler 442b. Every few minutes, she'd catch herself scanning the windows for sniper positions, or calculating the blast radius if someone threw a plasma grenade through the door. Old habits from a war most people didn't even know was still happening. Mrs. Peterson droned on about quantum mechanics, while Sarah's enhanced neural implant quietly ran tactical assessments. The technology was supposed to be removed when she was discharged, but certain protocols had been left in place. Protocols that were now screaming warnings about the encrypted message she'd received. 2 rows ahead, Derek Sullivan was struggling with his tablet, trying to solve basic physics equations that Sarah could complete in her sleep. She remembered when physics had been hard for her too, back when she was actually 16 instead of just pretending to be, back before the military had accelerated her education and shoved 2 years of advanced science into her brain during the neural conditioning process. The bell rang, and students began filing out. Sarah was gathering her things when Mrs. Peterson called her name. "Sarah, could you stay for a moment? I wanted to discuss your performance." Sarah's muscles tensed. Had someone figured out who she really was? She forced herself to walk casually to the teacher's desk, keeping her hands visible and her posture non-threatening. "Basic infiltration protocol. Your test scores are exceptional," Mrs. Peterson said, shuffling through some papers. "But you never participate in class discussions. And your answers, they're too advanced. You're solving problems using methods we won't cover until next semester." Sarah's heart rate spiked. She'd been too careless, letting her real knowledge slip through. I read ahead sometimes. Sarah, I've been teaching for 20 years. Students who read ahead make small errors or show gaps in understanding. Your work reads like it was written by someone with a graduate degree in theoretical physics." Mrs. Peterson leaned forward, her voice gentle but concerned. "Where did you really go for those 2 years?" Before Sarah could answer, every screen in the classroom flickered. For just a split second, the display showed a symbol Sarah recognized with sickening clarity, the jagged crest of the Kralith Empire, burned into her memory from 1,000 nightmare battles. Mrs. Peterson didn't notice. Humans couldn't process visual information fast enough to catch the brief glitch. But Sarah's enhanced reflexes had caught every detail. Someone was in the school's network. Someone who knew exactly what that symbol would mean to her. "I have to go," Sarah said, backing toward the door. "Family emergency." She didn't wait for a response. She was already moving, her training taking over as she navigated the crowded hallways. Students complained as she pushed past them, but Sarah barely heard their protests. She was scanning faces looking for anyone who didn't belong, anyone whose movements were too controlled, too aware. She made it to her locker and quickly input the combination. Hidden behind her textbooks was a small device that looked like a standard emergency beacon. But Sarah knew it was actually a quantum communicator, capable of reaching command even from Earth's isolated location in the spiral arm. Her hands shook as she activated it. She hadn't used military channels in 6 months, hadn't spoken to anyone from her old unit since the debriefing, but the Kralith symbol had changed everything. Ghost Actual. "This is Reaper 7. Authentication code Delta 47 Tango." Her voice was barely a whisper, but the device's sensors would pick up every syllable. The response came immediately, crackling through encrypted quantum static. "Reaper 7, Ghost Actual. Authentication confirmed. We've been trying to reach you for 3 hours. Where have you been? Sarah recognized the voice. Colonel Marcus Rivera, her former commanding officer. The man who'd signed her discharge papers and promised she could have a normal life. Sir, I was in class. What's the situation? The situation is FUBAR, soldier. The Kralith broke through the Centauri defense grid 12 hours ago. They're moving toward Earth with a fleet we've never seen before, bigger than anything from the intelligence reports. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Earth was supposed to be safe, hidden. The Terran Defense Force had spent 3 years making sure humanity's homeworld stayed off the Kralith star charts. How did they find us? She asked. We're still figuring that out. But Sarah, that's not why I'm calling. We need you back. The brass is activating Protocol 7. Sarah's enhanced implant immediately accessed the classified database, displaying Protocol 7's details directly into her visual cortex. Total planetary defense. All discharged Special Forces personnel recalled to active duty. No exceptions, sir, I can't. The conditioning protocols, the therapist said returning to active duty could trigger. I know what the therapist said, Rivera interrupted. But we're not talking about another border skirmish on some distant world. This is Earth, Reaper, your home, your family. Sarah thought about her parents, who believed she'd spent 2 years in an advanced study program. Her little brother Tommy, who was probably at soccer practice right now, worried about nothing more complicated than making the varsity team. All the normal people living normal lives because soldiers like her had kept the monsters at bay. Besides, Rivera continued, you're the only one who's faced their new bioweapons and lived. The intelligence you gathered on Kepler 442b, it might be the key to stopping them. Sarah closed her eyes, remembering the horrors she'd witnessed on that frozen world. The Kralith had been experimenting with genetic warfare, creating creatures that could adapt to human weapons in real time. She'd lost half her squad studying those abominations, gathering data that Command insisted was vital for humanity's survival. What about my cover? If I disappear again, already handled. By tomorrow morning, everyone will believe Sarah Chen died in a transport accident. Clean extraction, no questions asked? The casual way he talked about erasing her life made Sarah's stomach turn. These people had given her a new identity once, and they could take it away just as easily. She'd always known this was temporary, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. Sir, if I do this, if I come back, I need guarantees about what happens when it's over. Reaper, if we don't stop this fleet, there won't be an after. They're carrying enough firepower to glass every major city on Earth. And according to our intelligence, they're not coming to conquer. They're coming to exterminate. Sarah looked through the small window in her locker door. Students were walking by, laughing and joking, completely unaware that their world was about to change forever. Marcus Webb was at his locker across the hall, probably still nursing his wrist from their earlier encounter. Jessica Wong was posting something on her social feed, her biggest worry whether she'd get enough likes. In 12 hours, they might all be dead. Extraction point? Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the chaos in her head. Grid reference Sierra 79, the old industrial district. Ship will be waiting at 2100 hours. Bring nothing. Everything you need will be provided. Understood, sir. How bad is it really? There was a long pause. When Rivera spoke again, his voice carried the weight of a man who'd seen too much death. Bad enough that they're bringing you back, Reaper, and you know what you cost them last time. The connection cut, leaving Sarah alone with the weight of an impossible choice. She could run, change her identity again, disappear into the crowd of 8 billion humans, let someone else save the world. But she'd tried running once before, and the nightmares had followed her anyway. At least this time she could make them count for something. Sarah closed her locker and walked toward the exit, each step taking her further from the normal life she'd desperately wanted, and closer to the war she'd never really left. Behind her, students continued their daily routines, blissfully unaware that their quiet protector was about to vanish once again into the darkness between the stars. Sarah stood outside her family's suburban home, watching her little brother Tommy kick a soccer ball against the garage door. Each thump echoed like distant artillery fire in her enhanced hearing. She had 3 hours before extraction, and she couldn't leave without seeing them one last time, even if they could never know the truth. Sarah, Tommy spotted her and ran over, his face bright with excitement. You're home early. Want to practice with me? Coach says I might make varsity if I work on my footwork. 14 years old, and his biggest worry was making the soccer team. Sarah remembered being 14 once, though it felt like a lifetime ago. before the recruitment officers had shown up at her school with their promises of adventure and service. Before she'd learned that monsters were real and they were coming for humanity. "Sure," she said, forcing a smile. "Show me what you've been working on." For 20 minutes, Sarah played soccer with her brother in their small backyard. She had to consciously dial back her enhanced reflexes, making herself move at normal human speed. Tommy was good, but to her augmented senses, he might as well have been moving in slow motion. "You're getting better," she told him, and meant it. "Keep practicing and you'll definitely make varsity." Tommy grinned and jogged back toward the house. "Mom made that chicken thing you like. She said you've been stressed about college applications." College applications. Her cover story for why she'd been distant lately. Sarah's parents thought she was a normal 17-year-old worried about her future. They had no idea their daughter had already seen more of the universe than most humans ever would. Inside, the smell of her mother's cooking hit her like a physical blow. Familiar and warm and everything she was about to lose again. Her mother, Dr. Linda Chen, looked up from the stove with a concerned expression. "Sweetheart, you look pale. Are you feeling all right?" Sarah's mother was a pediatrician, trained to spot signs of illness or distress, but she couldn't recognize the haunted look that came from watching squad mates die, or the tension that never left a soldier's shoulders. "Just tired," Sarah said. "Long day at school." Her father emerged from his home office, still wearing his engineering firm's polo shirt. David Chen was the kind of man who solved problems with logic and persistence. He'd spent weeks researching colleges for Sarah, creating spreadsheets of acceptance rates and scholarship opportunities. He had no idea his daughter had already served 2 tours of duty in an interstellar war. "I found 3 more schools with excellent xenobiology programs," he said, waving a tablet enthusiastically.
The application deadlines are still months away?
"But it's good to start early." Sarah's enhanced implant automatically accessed the school's databases, analyzing their actual xenobiology curricula in milliseconds. Basic alien anatomy and theoretical first contact protocols. Nothing about combat applications or enemy weak points. Nothing that would help humanity survive what was coming. "Dad, can I ask you something?" Sarah sat down at the kitchen table, trying to find the right words. "If you knew something terrible was going to happen, but telling people would only make them panic, would you still tell them?" David considered this seriously, the way he approached all of life's problems. "That depends. Could they do anything about it if they knew?" "No, nothing at all. Then I'd probably keep it to myself. Sometimes protecting people means letting them live in peace, even if that peace is temporary." Sarah nodded, feeling a bitter vindication. Her father had just explained why the military kept the war classified. Why billions of people went about their daily lives unaware that humanity was fighting for its survival, across dozens of star systems. Her mother set a plate in front of her. The same dinner she'd made hundreds of times before. "Sarah, you've been different since you got back from that study program. Distant, are you sure you're okay?" The study program. Another lie, though this one had been crafted by military psychologists to explain her 2-year absence. Her parents believed she'd been selected for an advanced academic program on one of the research stations. They were proud of her accomplishment, completely unaware that their daughter had actually been fighting aliens in the outer colonies. "I'm fine, Mom. The program was just intense, a lot to process." "Well, you're home now," her mother said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "And you don't have to carry everything alone anymore." The irony was crushing. Sarah was about to leave again, this time possibly forever, and her family would never know why. The military would stage her death, probably a transport accident like Rivera had mentioned. Her parents would grieve for a daughter who'd been living a lie, never knowing she'd died trying to save them. Tommy returned from washing up, chattering about his soccer team's upcoming tournament. Normal teenager problems that seemed impossibly precious now. Sarah listened to every word, memorizing the sound of his voice, the way his eyes lit up when he talked about something he loved. After dinner, she helped her mother with the dishes while her father and Tommy watched the news. The broadcasters were talking about trade negotiations and political scandals. No mention of alien fleets or impending invasion. The censorship protocols were working perfectly, keeping humanity calm while their protectors prepared for war. "I love you, Mom," Sarah said suddenly, surprising herself with the intensity in her voice. Her mother looked up, concerned. "I love you too, sweetheart." "Sarah, you're scaring me a little. What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I don't say it enough." You and Dad and Tommy. You're the best family anyone could ask for." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, honey, we love you so much. You know that, right? No matter what happens, no matter where life takes you, you'll always be our little girl." Sarah had to turn away before her composure cracked completely. She excused herself and went upstairs to her room. The bedroom of a normal teenager with posters of music artists and photos from school events. A life she'd constructed carefully to hide the truth of what she really was. She sat on her bed and pulled out a piece of paper, writing 3 letters by hand. One for each member of her family. She couldn't tell them the truth, but she could tell them how much they meant to her, how proud she was to be their daughter and sister, how they'd given her something worth fighting for. At 9:30, Sarah kissed her sleeping brother's forehead and hugged her parents goodnight. Her mother made her promise to get enough sleep, worried about the dark circles under her eyes. Her father reminded her about the college applications, still believing his daughter had a normal future ahead of her. Sarah walked to her room and closed the door. Then she opened her window and slipped out into the night, moving with the silent precision of a trained infiltrator. Behind her, she left the 3 letters on her pillow, along with her civilian identity. The industrial district was a 20-minute walk, but Sarah took a longer route, avoiding security cameras and staying in the shadows. She'd learned urban camouflage techniques on a dozen different worlds, and Earth's surveillance systems were surprisingly primitive compared to Kralith sensor networks. The extraction point was an abandoned warehouse, its windows dark and broken. Sarah approached carefully, her enhanced senses scanning for threats. Old habits died hard, and trusting anyone completely was a luxury soldiers couldn't afford. A figure stepped out of the shadows, and Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward a weapon that wasn't there. But she recognized the voice immediately. "Easy, Reaper. It's just me." Sergeant Major Elena Vasquez emerged into the dim streetlight, her scarred face wearing the same grim expression Sarah remembered from a dozen battlefields. Vasquez had been her squad leader during the worst fighting on Kepler 442b, the one who'd pulled Sarah out of the rubble after the bioweapon attack that had killed the rest of Echo Company. "Sarge," Sarah said, allowing herself a small smile. "I didn't think they'd send you. Colonel Rivera thought you might need a familiar face. Plus, someone had to make sure you actually showed up. You always were the smartest one in the unit, smart enough to know when a mission was suicide." "Is it? Suicide?" Vasquez shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes about their chances. "Maybe, probably, but if we don't try, everyone dies anyway. At least this way we go down fighting." A ship materialized above them, its stealth field shimmering as it decloaked. Sarah had seen the technology before, but it still impressed her. Human engineering had advanced rapidly during the war, driven by necessity and desperation. "Last chance to walk away," Vasquez said. "No one would blame you. You've already given more than anyone should have to." Sarah looked back toward her neighborhood, where her family slept peacefully in their beds. Normal people living normal lives because soldiers like her stood between them and the darkness. "Let's go save the world. Sarge." As the transport beam enveloped her, Sarah felt the last pieces of her civilian identity dissolving away. Sarah Chen, high school student, was gone forever. In her place stood Captain Sarah Reaper Chen, humanity's most decorated Special Forces operator. The war had found her again. This time she was ready for it. The transport ship's medical bay hummed with activity as Sarah submitted to the reactivation process. Technicians moved around her with practiced efficiency, reconnecting neural pathways that had been carefully dampened during her discharge. Each connection sent lightning through her nervous system, awakening capabilities she'd tried so hard to forget. "Neural integration at 60%, announced Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's chief medical officer. "Combat reflexes coming online. Tactical analysis subroutines activating." Sarah gritted her teeth as her enhanced senses suddenly exploded back to full capacity. The ship's hull became transparent to her perception, revealing the crew moving through corridors 3 decks away. She could hear heartbeats, smell fear sweat, detect the subtle electromagnetic signatures of weapons being maintained. "Easy, Reaper," Vasquez said from beside the medical table. "Let it come back gradually. Don't fight it," but Sarah couldn't help fighting it. For 6 months, she'd worked to suppress these abilities to be normal. Now they were flooding back like a dam bursting, turning her into a weapon again whether she wanted it or not. "Integration complete," Dr. Kim announced. "All systems green. How do you feel, Captain?" Sarah sat up slowly, her body automatically adjusting to the ship's artificial gravity. Like I never left, that was the problem. Her civilian life already felt like a dream, while the familiar weight of combat readiness felt like coming home. The conditioning ran deeper than she'd realized. "Good," came a voice from the doorway. Colonel Rivera stepped into the medical bay, looking older than Sarah remembered. The war had aged all of them, but command positions took an especially heavy toll. "Because we need to brief you on what we're facing." They moved to the ship's tactical center, where a holographic display showed the Sol system in 3 dimensions. Red icons marked the approaching Kralith fleet, while blue symbols represented humanity's defensive positions. The ratio was not encouraging. "They're calling it the Extinction Fleet," Rivera began. 47 Dreadnought-class vessels, each one 3 times larger than anything we've seen before. Plus support ships, carriers, and bioweapon deployment platforms. Sarah studied the tactical display, her enhanced mind automatically calculating vectors and engagement zones. "Our defensive strength? 12 battleships, 36 cruisers, and whatever orbital defense platforms haven't been sabotaged." Rivera's voice carried the weight of inevitable defeat. "We're outnumbered 4-1, and their technology has advanced since Kepler 442b. Sabotaged?" Sarah's attention snapped to Rivera. "You think there's a mole?" "We know there's a mole. Someone's been feeding the Kralith intelligence for months. That's how they found Earth, and that's how they knew to develop countermeasures for our latest weapons." Vasquez pulled up another display, showing personnel files and security footage. "We've narrowed it down to 3 possibilities. All high-ranking officers with access to classified tactical data." Sarah recognized the faces immediately. Admiral Thompson from Naval Command, General Harrison from the Marine Corps, and Dr. Elizabeth Warren, the scientist who'd helped develop humanity's bioweapon countermeasures, all of them heroes of the war effort, trusted with humanity's most vital secrets. "Any one of them could have done it," Rivera continued, "which is why we're activating Protocol 7 with a twist. 3 separate mission plans, each fed to a different suspect. Whichever plan the Kralith are prepared for will tell us who the traitor is. And the other 2 plans? We'll probably get everyone killed." Rivera's honesty was brutal but necessary. "That's why we need you, Reaper. You're the only operator with the skills to adapt on the fly when everything goes wrong." Sarah studied the mission parameters, her tactical implant running probability calculations. The numbers were grim. Even the best-case scenario gave them less than a 20% chance of stopping the fleet. "There's something else," Dr. Kim interjected. "The bioweapons intelligence you gathered on Kepler 442b. We think we've found a way to turn it against them." A new display materialized, showing the genetic structure of Kralith bioweapons. Sarah recognized the adaptive neural networks, the self-modifying DNA sequences that made the creatures nearly impossible to kill. "Their greatest strength is also their weakness," Dr. Kim explained. "The adaptation process requires massive amounts of energy. If we can force them to adapt repeatedly in a short time frame, they'll burn themselves out," Sarah finished. "But that would require exposing our forces to multiple bioweapon attacks. The casualties would be enormous." "Not necessarily." Dr. Kim pulled up another file, this one marked with the highest security classifications. "We've developed a new type of nanite based on your field reports. It can simulate human biosignatures while carrying tailored toxins. The bioweapons will adapt to fight the nanites instead of actual humans." Sarah felt a chill of recognition. "You're talking about using me as bait. My biosignature is in their databases from Kepler 442b. They'll prioritize adapting to counter me specifically." "That's the idea," Rivera said quietly. "You walk into their deployment zones, trigger massive bioweapon responses, and let them burn themselves out trying to kill you. Meanwhile, our real forces hit their fleet. And if the nanites don't work? If the bioweapons adapt faster than expected?" Rivera met her eyes directly. "Then you die. Probably horribly. But you might buy us enough time to evacuate Earth's major population centers." Sarah turned back to the tactical display, watching the red icons of the Kralith fleet creep closer to Earth. In 18 hours, they'd be in weapons range. In 24, the bombardment would begin. "What about my family?" she asked. "Priority evacuation. They'll be on the first transport to the Mars colonies along with other essential personnel families." Rivera paused. "They'll never know why, but they'll be safe." Sarah closed her eyes, imagining her parents and Tommy on some transport ship, confused and frightened but alive. It wasn't the normal life she'd wanted for them, but it was better than the alternative. I need to see the bioweapon data again, she said. All of it. If I'm going to be bait, I want to understand exactly what I'm walking into. For the next 6 hours, Sarah immersed herself in classified research files and combat footage. She watched bioweapon attacks from a dozen different worlds, studying their adaptation patterns and hunting behaviors. Her enhanced mind absorbed every detail, building tactical profiles that would help her survive what was coming. The creatures were nightmares made flesh, shape-shifting horrors that could modify their biology in real time, growing new weapons and defenses based on whatever they encountered. On Kepler 442b, Sarah had seen one adapt from a simple beast to an armored killing machine in less than 20 minutes. But they had limitations. The adaptation process was energy-intensive and followed predictable patterns. If she could force them to waste energy on useless modifications, she might survive long enough for the plan to work. Captain Chen, to the bridge, came the announcement over the ship's communication system. Sarah made her way through corridors filled with grim-faced soldiers preparing for what might be humanity's final battle. Everyone knew the odds. Everyone understood that they were probably going to die. But they were going to fight anyway because that's what humans did. On the bridge, the main display showed Earth growing larger as they approached the planet. Home, the blue marble that had given birth to humanity and sent them out among the stars. In a few hours, Sarah would be fighting to defend it with her life. ETA to deployment zone, 6 hours, reported the navigation officer. All systems green for combat insertion. Sarah stood at the observation window watching Earth turn slowly beneath them. Somewhere down there, her family was probably eating breakfast, getting ready for another normal day. Tommy would be in his first period class, maybe thinking about soccer tryouts. Her parents would be at work, saving lives and solving problems, completely unaware that their daughter was about to risk everything to save theirs. No pressure. Reaper, Vasquez said, joining her at the window. Just the fate of the human race riding on your shoulders. Sarah smiled grimly. When you put it like that, how can I refuse? In 6 hours, Captain Sarah Reaper Chen would drop into hell itself, armed with nothing but her wits, her training, and a desperate plan that probably wouldn't work. But she'd face those odds gladly, because somewhere on the planet below, her little brother was dreaming of making the varsity soccer team. Some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The drop pod screamed through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star, its heat shields glowing white-hot as Sarah plummeted toward the Kralith deployment zone. Through the small porthole, she could see the alien bioships settling into the Pacific Ocean like massive organic islands, already beginning to spawn their living weapons. 60 seconds to impact, her suit's AI announced in a calm voice that contrasted sharply with the violence of atmospheric entry. Biosignature masking active. Nanite deployment systems online. Sarah checked her equipment one final time. No traditional weapons, those would be useless against bioweapons anyway. Instead, she carried a dozen different nanite canisters, each one programmed to trigger specific adaptation responses in the Kralith creatures. Her real weapon was herself, the biosignature that would draw every monster on the battlefield directly to her location. This is Reaper 7, beginning final approach. Ghost Actual, confirm you're tracking my descent. Rivera's voice crackled through the quantum communicator. Confirmed, Reaper. Bioweapon activity is spiking across all deployment zones. They know you're coming. Of course they did. Sarah's enhanced DNA had been mapped by Kralith sensors during the Kepler 442b campaign. To them, she wasn't just another human soldier. She was the one who'd killed their war beasts, who'd destroyed their primary breeding facility, who'd cost them thousands of their bioweapons. She was a priority target worth adapting for. The pod hit the ocean with tremendous force, its impact cushioned by emergency repulsors. Sarah felt the jolt through her entire body as the pod sank rapidly through the dark water. Around her, she could sense massive shapes moving. Bioships the size of aircraft carriers disgorging their living cargo. At 50 meters depth, the pod's emergency release triggered. Sarah swam out into the alien-infested waters of the Pacific, her enhanced lungs allowing her to hold her breath far longer than any normal human. Above her, bioluminescent shapes descended like deadly jellyfish, their tentacles already beginning to morph as they detected her presence. Sarah activated her first nanite canister, releasing millions of microscopic machines into the water around her. To the bioweapons, the nanites would appear to be additional human targets, each one carrying her modified biosignature. Let them try to adapt to kill 1,000 different versions of her. The first creature reached her as she swam toward the surface. It had been a simple jellyfish analog when it started its descent, but already it was growing armor plating and what looked like projectile launchers. Sarah let it get close, allowing its sensors to lock onto her, then triggered a second nanite release. The creature convulsed as its adaptation protocols went haywire, trying to counter threats that didn't actually exist. Its biomass began to smoke as it burned through energy reserves, reshaping itself again and again to fight enemies that were just sophisticated decoys. Sarah broke the surface and immediately dove again as more creatures converged on her position. The ocean around her was becoming a churning mass of adaptive horror, bioweapons flowing like living oil as they tried to determine the most effective form to take against her. Reaper 7 to Ghost Actual, she transmitted, while dodging a creature that had sprouted razor-sharp fins. Initial deployment successful. Bioweapons are burning adaptation energy faster than projected. Copy that, Reaper. Fleet engagement begins in 30 minutes. How long can you keep them busy? Sarah looked around at the writhing mass of monsters surrounding her. Each one was unique now, shaped by its attempts to counter her nanite signatures. Some had grown massive claws, others had developed ranged weapons. Still others had become living projectiles designed to ram their targets. None of them were optimized for actual combat anymore. Give me an hour, she said, triggering her third nanite canister. I think I can keep their attention that long. Swimming through the bioweapon swarm was like navigating a living nightmare. Creatures that had started as simple organisms were now twisted into impossible shapes, their biology warped by endless adaptation cycles. Sarah used every technique she'd learned in Special Forces training, diving deep to avoid flying forms, then surfacing suddenly to confuse pursuit algorithms. The key was to never let them adapt to her actual capabilities. Every few minutes, she'd trigger another nanite release, each one programmed with different fake biosignatures. The creatures would detect the new threats and immediately begin reshaping themselves, burning precious energy reserves in the process. 20 minutes into the engagement, Sarah noticed the first signs of bioweapon exhaustion. A creature that had been pursuing her suddenly stopped mid-transformation, its half-formed weapons dissolving back into basic tissue. Its adaptation systems had finally overloaded. More began failing as the minutes passed. The ocean around Sarah gradually cleared as bioweapons either burned out completely or reverted to basic survival forms. Her plan was working, but she was paying the price. Even with her enhanced physiology, the constant swimming and diving was taking its toll. Ghost Actual, this is Reaper 7, she transmitted, breathing hard as she treaded water. Primary bioweapon swarm is neutralized. Moving to secondary deployment zone. Negative, Reaper. Stay where you are. Long-range sensors show massive bioweapon reinforcements heading your way. We need you to repeat the process. Sarah looked toward the horizon and saw them coming. A second wave of bioships rising from the ocean depths, their hulls already opening to release fresh horrors. These would be different from the first wave, adapted based on data from the initial engagement. They'd be harder to fool, but she had tricks left to play. Sarah activated her emergency beacon, a device that would broadcast what appeared to be a human distress signal. To the Kralith bioweapons, it would look like she was calling for rescue, trying to summon additional human forces to her location. The approaching bioweapons immediately altered course, their simple alien minds focusing on what appeared to be a concentration of human activity. Sarah smiled grimly and prepared her next set of nanite canisters. This batch was programmed with the biosignatures of prominent military commanders, making each nanite appear to be a high-value target. The second wave hit her position like a living tsunami. Creatures the size of whales dove from the bioships, their forms already beginning to shift as they detected multiple command-level human signatures in the water. Sarah found herself in the center of a feeding frenzy, dozens of monsters competing to kill what they thought were enemy leaders. She dove deep, using the confusion to her advantage. The bioweapons turned on each other as their targeting systems became overwhelmed, each creature trying to claim the most valuable kills. Sarah swam between them like a ghost, triggering nanite releases that added even more false targets to the chaos. 40 minutes into the second engagement, her communicator crackled with an update from Rivera. Reaper, this is Ghost Actual. Fleet engagement is going better than expected. Enemy response is sluggish, and their bioweapon deployments are scattered. Whatever you're doing, keep it up. Sarah was exhausted now, her enhanced physiology pushed to its limits, but she could see the results of her efforts. The second bioweapon wave was burning itself out even faster than the first, their adaptation systems completely overwhelmed by the false target data. She was preparing to move to the third deployment zone when something changed. The bioweapons around her suddenly stopped their frenzied adaptations and began moving in coordinated patterns. Their simple alien intelligence had been replaced by something far more sophisticated. "Oh no," Sarah whispered, recognizing the signs. "Ghost Actual, we have a problem. The bioweapons are showing directed intelligence. Someone's taking direct control." "That's impossible," Rivera replied. "Kralith command ships don't have that kind of range." But Sarah could see the truth in the water around her. The bioweapons were no longer acting on instinct and adaptation protocols. They were being guided by an intelligence that understood her tactics and was adapting to counter them. High above, invisible to her enhanced senses, a cloaked Kralith command vessel dropped stealth protocols and began transmitting directly to its bioweapons. The trap had been sprung, and Sarah was at the center of it. The mole in human command had done more than just provide intelligence. They'd helped the Kralith plan this entire engagement, using Sarah's own tactics against her. Now she faced an enemy that knew exactly what she was trying to do and had prepared countermeasures. The bioweapons began forming hunting patterns, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Sarah's nanite deceptions were no longer working, the enemy intelligence easily distinguishing between real and false targets. For the first time since the mission began, Captain Sarah Reaper Chen realized she might not make it home, but she was going to take as many of these monsters with her as possible. Sarah's enhanced reflexes saved her life as a bioweapon. The size of a bus erupted from the depths directly beneath her. She rolled away from its snapping jaws, feeling the displacement of water as massive teeth closed on empty ocean, where she'd been floating seconds before. The creature didn't give up. Unlike the previous bioweapons, this one wasn't wasting energy on random adaptations. It had been designed specifically to hunt her, its form optimized based on her known capabilities and equipment. Sleek and fast, with enhanced sensory organs that could track her even through the nanite interference. "Ghost Actual, this is Reaper 7, Sarah transmitted while diving to avoid another attack. "The enemy has deployed hunter variants. They know our playbook," Rivera's response was grim. "Confirmed, Reaper. We're seeing the same thing across all engagement zones. Someone fed them detailed intelligence on Protocol 7. Sarah cursed as she understood the implications. The traitor hadn't just revealed their plans. They'd helped the Kralith prepare countermeasures for every aspect of the operation. The bioweapons pursuing her weren't random adaptations anymore. They were purpose-built killing machines designed to neutralize humanity's most effective special forces operator. A second hunter variant attacked from her left, forcing Sarah to dive deeper. These creatures worked in coordinated packs, their movements synchronized by the command vessel overhead. She could feel its presence now, a dark intelligence pressing against her enhanced senses like a weight on her mind. Sarah triggered her emergency reserves, releasing stimulants directly into her bloodstream. Her already enhanced reflexes accelerated further, the world around her slowing to a crawl as her nervous system overclocked itself. It would only last a few minutes before the crash hit, but those minutes might be enough. She swam between the hunting pack, using their coordination against them. When one hunter dove to intercept her, she used its momentum to pivot around it, placing it between herself and the others. The lead hunter couldn't adjust course fast enough and collided with its packmate, buying Sarah precious seconds. But there were too many of them, and more were arriving every minute. The cloaked command ship was spawning hunters faster than she could evade them. Sarah's nanite supply was running low, and the false signatures were no longer effective against creatures designed to hunt her specifically. "Reaper 7, what's your status?" Rivera's voice carried desperate concern. "Surrounded by hostiles designed to kill me specifically. Nanite countermeasures ineffective. I need a new plan, sir." There was a pause before Rivera responded, and Sarah knew he was consulting with the tactical team. "Reaper, we're uploading new mission parameters. The bioweapon disruption was successful, but we need you to take out that command ship. It's coordinating defensive patterns that are costing us the fleet engagement." Sarah looked up through the dark water toward where she knew the cloaked vessel waited. A command ship would be heavily shielded, armed with weapons that could vaporize her before she got within a kilometer of it. And she'd have to get through the hunter pack first. Sir, I don't have equipment for ship-to-ship combat. Negative, Reaper. You are the equipment. Your biosignature is the key. Get aboard that ship and let your nanites loosen their bio-neural networks, turn their own adaptation systems against them. It was insane. Brilliant, but insane. Kralith ships used bio-neural networks to coordinate their systems, organic computers that could adapt and evolve in real time. If she could introduce corrupted nanite data directly into those networks, she might be able to cause a cascade failure. But first, she had to get there alive. Sarah began swimming upward, using her remaining nanites not as decoys but as weapons. She programmed them with corrupted adaptation data, false evolutionary templates that would confuse any bioweapon that absorbed them. The hunters pursuing her wouldn't know they were being poisoned until it was too late. The first hunter to make contact convulsed as the corrupted nanites infiltrated its system. Its perfect hunting form began to collapse, organs reshaping themselves into useless configurations as its adaptation protocols went haywire. The creature died in agony, its biology turning against itself. Sarah used the confusion to break through the hunting pack, swimming toward the surface with everything she had left. Behind her, more hunters were falling victim to the nanite corruption, their coordinated attack dissolving into chaos as their bodies betrayed them. She broke the surface to find the ocean around her churning with dying bioweapons, but her victory was short-lived. The cloaked command ship materialized directly above her, its massive bulk blocking out the sky. Weapon ports opened along its bio-organic hull, energy building for a killing shot. Sarah dove just as the ship fired, plasma beams turning the water around her into superheated steam. She felt the heat wash over her as she swam deeper, using the thermal disruption to mask her movements from the ship's sensors. The command vessel was settling lower, trying to get a better firing angle. Sarah could see its biomechanical ventilation ports opening and closing as the ship breathed. Like all Kralith vessels, it was as much living creature as spacecraft, requiring constant circulation of organic fluids through its hull. There, an intake port large enough for her to swim through if she could time it right. Sarah waited for the next breathing cycle, then kicked upward with everything she had. The port opened just as she reached it, organic muscles contracting to draw her inside. Swimming through the bioship's circulatory system was like navigating the arteries of some impossible monster. The walls pulsed around her, pumping alien fluids that burned her skin even through her suit's protection. Bioluminescent organs provided dim light, revealing a maze of organic passages that defied human understanding. Sarah followed the main circulation path toward what her tactical implant identified as the ship's neural center. The corridors grew wider as she approached the brain, filled with a thick organic fluid that served as both coolant and nutrient supply for the bio-neural networks. She emerged into a vast chamber filled with pulsing neural tissue, organic computers the size of buildings connected by networks of living cables. The ship's brain, the source of the intelligence that had nearly killed her. Sarah pulled out her last nanite canisters, the ones loaded with the most virulent corruption protocols she carried. But before she could deploy them, the chamber around her began to change. The neural networks were adapting to her presence, growing new defensive structures to protect themselves from contamination. Too late, she whispered, and triggered every remaining nanite at once. The corruption spread through the bio-neural networks like wildfire, each infected node passing the false data to its neighbors in an exponential cascade. The ship's brain tried to adapt, but the nanites were designed to evolve faster than any biological system could counter. Alarms began sounding throughout the vessel, biomechanical warning calls that spoke of critical system failures. The ship's perfect coordination was dissolving as its neural networks turned against each other, each node trying to purge corruption that had already spread beyond containment. Sarah felt the ship beginning to die around her as its nervous system collapsed. But she was trapped in the neural chamber, the passages she'd used to enter now sealed by defensive measures. The ship was going to take her with it when it crashed. "Ghost Actual, this is Reaper 7, she transmitted through the interference. "Command ship is neutralized. Repeat, command ship is down. I'm trapped inside. Don't think I'm making it out of this one." Rivera's voice came through broken by static. "Reaper, hold position. Extraction team is en route. But Sarah could feel the ship falling, its biomechanical systems shutting down one by one. The neural fluid around her was turning toxic as the dying brain leaked chemical waste products. Her suit's life support was already showing critical readings. She thought about her family, probably still being evacuated to the Mars colonies, never knowing what had happened to their daughter and sister. About Tommy and his dreams of making varsity. About her parents who'd raised her to be strong and brave, never knowing how literally she'd take those lessons. The ship hit the ocean with tremendous force, its dying hull beginning to crack and flood. But Sarah was still alive, still fighting as ocean water rushed into the neural chamber. She was Captain Sarah Reaper Chen, and she wasn't done yet. Above the dying command ship, human rescue vessels converged on her last known position, racing against time to save the soldier who'd just turned the tide of humanity's most desperate battle. 3 months later, Sarah stood in the hallway of Nova Academy once again, but everything was different now. The same students walked past her, but they moved with purpose instead of casual indifference. Everyone knew what had almost happened to Earth, how close they'd come to extinction. The war was no longer classified. The official story was that Sarah Chen had died in a transport accident during the evacuation. The girl walking these halls now was supposedly her cousin, also named Sarah, who'd been granted a scholarship in honor of the deceased student. It was another lie in a life built on necessary deceptions, but at least this time the lies served peace instead of war. "Miss Chen, welcome to our school," Principal Martinez said, approaching with a warm smile. "I hope you'll find our programs challenging. Your cousin spoke very highly of our xenobiology department before her tragic accident." Sarah nodded politely, playing her role. The real challenge wasn't the academics. It was pretending to be a normal teenager when she'd just saved human civilization. Her enhanced implants had been dialed back but not removed, leaving her with capabilities she had to constantly suppress. She made her way to advanced xenobiology, the same classroom where this had all started. Professor Martinez was discussing Kralith adaptation protocols, but now he was teaching real information instead of sanitized theories. The students hung on every word, understanding that this knowledge might one day save their lives. The bioweapon corruption technique developed during the Battle of Earth has revolutionized our understanding of adaptive biology, the professor explained. A single special forces operator managed to turn the enemy's greatest strength against them, saving millions of lives. Sarah kept her expression neutral as her classmates discussed the legendary Reaper who'd infiltrated the Kralith command ship. They spoke of her like a myth, a superhuman warrior who'd emerged from nowhere to save humanity. None of them suspected that Legend was sitting in the back row, struggling with the same calculus homework they were. After class, she walked to her old hiding spot behind the gymnasium, needing a moment of solitude. But she wasn't alone. Tommy was there shooting baskets by himself. Her heart clenched as she saw him, older now and carrying himself differently. The evacuation had changed everyone, even those who'd been kept safe. "Hey," she said, approaching carefully. "Mind if I watch?" Tommy looked up, and for a moment Sarah thought he recognized her. But he just shrugged and went back to shooting. "Sure, I'm Tommy Chen. You're the new girl, right?" "Sarah? Yeah, I heard about your sister. I'm sorry." Tommy's expression darkened. "Yeah, everyone's sorry. But being sorry doesn't bring her back." He threw the ball harder than necessary. She was supposed to come home. Mom and Dad said she was just going to some academic thing, then boom. Transport accident. They won't even tell us what really happened. Sarah wanted to tell him everything. That she was alive. That she'd fought to keep him safe. That every moment of pain she'd endured had been worth it to see him standing there complaining about homework and basketball tryouts. But she couldn't. Sarah Chen was dead and she had to stay dead. What was she like? Sarah asked instead. "Weird," Tommy said with a sad smile. "Smart but weird. She'd disappear for hours, and when she came back she'd look at us like she was seeing ghosts. Mom and Dad thought she was just stressed about college, but I knew it was something else." He made another shot, then turned to face her directly. "The thing is, sometimes I dream about her. And in the dreams, she's not dead. She's somewhere out there, fighting monsters and saving people. Stupid, right?" Sarah's throat tightened. "Maybe not so stupid. Maybe she's watching out for you." "Yeah, maybe." Tommy grabbed his backpack. "I should get going. Varsity practice starts in 10 minutes. Coach says I might actually make the team this year. She'd be proud of you, Sarah said quietly. Tommy stopped and looked back at her with curious eyes. How would you know? Just a feeling. Sisters usually are. After he left, Sarah sat alone on the bleachers watching the empty basketball court. Her quantum communicator buzzed with an encrypted message. Colonel Rivera checking in as he did every week. Status report, Reaper. All quiet on the home front, sir. Integration proceeding normally. Good. The brass wants you to know that Kralith resistance has collapsed across all fronts. The corruption technique you developed is being deployed fleet-wide. War should be over within 6 months. Sarah closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of satisfaction. Humanity would survive. Her sacrifice had meant something. Any word on the mole investigation? Wrapped up last week. Dr. Warren broke under interrogation. Turns out the Kralith had her daughter for 2 years, threatened to kill her if Warren didn't cooperate. Can't say I blame her, but she'll spend the rest of her life in military prison. Another family destroyed by the war. Sarah wondered if Dr. Warren's daughter would ever know what her mother had sacrificed for her, just as Tommy would never know what his sister had given up. Orders, sir? Live your life, Reaper. Go to prom. Apply to colleges. Date someone nice. You've earned the right to be a normal kid. If only it were that simple. Sarah had tried being normal once before, and the war had found her anyway. But maybe this time would be different. Maybe she could build something real from the ashes of her old identity. She walked back toward the school building, passing groups of students making plans for the weekend, normal teenage concerns that seemed impossibly precious after everything she'd seen. A boy asked a girl to the spring dance. Friends argued about which movie to see. Simple, beautiful human moments that existed because soldiers like her had kept the monsters at bay. In her pocket, her civilian phone buzzed with a text from her aunt and uncle, the agents posing as her guardians. How was your first day of school? Good, she texted back. Think I'm going to like it here. It wasn't entirely a lie. For the first time in years, Sarah felt something approaching hope. She would never be truly normal, would always carry the weight of what she'd done and seen, but maybe that was okay. Maybe being extraordinary didn't have to mean being alone. As she walked through the hallways of Nova Academy, Sarah began to plan. Not tactical maneuvers or combat strategies, but the ordinary plans of a teenage girl. Which clubs to join, what classes to take, how to make friends who didn't know she'd once been the most feared human warrior in the galaxy. The legend of Reaper would live on in military records and history books. But Sarah Chen, the girl who'd saved humanity while pretending to be just another student, would finally get the chance to discover who she might have been if the universe had been a little kinder. Behind her, Tommy Chen made the shot that would earn him a spot on the varsity basketball team, never knowing that his dead sister was watching from the school windows with tears of pride in her eyes. On the front lines, she had been a legend. In class, she was still just that girl. And for the first time in her life, Sarah Chen was perfectly fine with that.